There are so many benefits to doing intermittent fasting, but there's also the dark side, which I want to talk about too.
Is there a dark side to intermittent fasting? Let's hear what Dr. Berg has to say about it. Welcome to another episode of Dr. Westman Reacts. If you don't have my top 10 tips on how to start keto right, please look in the description below. I get a lot of questions about intermittent fasting, and is it okay to do it, and in fact, what is it? And the problem is there aren't great definitions about what it is, and then it doesn't necessarily say what you're going to eat when you're not fasting. So let's see what Dr. Berg has to say.
There are so many benefits to doing intermittent fasting, but there's also the dark side, which I want to talk about too. The benefits are weight loss, cognitive improvements, focus, attention, memory, or heart issue, or whatever. You're going to find those will probably be a lot better. But here's the thing you need to know about intermittent fasting, okay? You're avoiding food for a period of time. And most of the things I'm going to talk about are not related necessarily to a 16 or 17 or 18-hour fast. I'm talking about when you do prolonged fasting. Let's say you're doing it for 48 hours, 72, or even longer. This information applies more to that situation. All right, so here's the thing. The purpose of food is to not just get fuel for your body. It's to get nutrients from the food. So if you are not eating because you're fasting, okay, you're restricting nutrients. And if your diet is not providing all the nutrients, okay, you can end up with not just deficiencies, but what's called subclinical nutrition deficiencies, and that can set you up for a lot of problems. So virtually all the things I'm going to talk about are related to that one point. So let's first talk about the first one. It's called refeeding syndrome. So let's say you do this, 3 or 4 or 5 day fast, okay?
So I'm just going to stop here for a moment. In my training as an obesity medicine specialist and going through the clinical vetting of board certification in the American Board of Obesity Medicine, I'm going to just say that if you have medical issues, if you're taking medications, you want to be very careful. In fact, I wouldn't even recommend doing prolonged fasting without a physician's supervision, without a doctor who understands what's going on. Because we're going to get into some things here that, again, Dr. Berg is a chiropractor. He has training, medical training as a chiropractor, and he has nutrition background, self-taught, I believe. And so now we're getting into an area where in my clinical practice, I may see someone on medicines for diabetes, for high blood pressure, for arthritis, for heartburn, all in the same individual. And so if you're going to be doing fasting or even intermittent fasting, or going to be doing a potent weight loss type of diet, a prescription strength diet, you want to be under the care of a physician, not only for the teaching of what to do, make sure you're doing it right, but for the monitoring and de-prescribing of the medication that you're on. So this, I wish this video would have had at the beginning, if you're under medical care, you're on medications, don't do this without the care of a physician. Maybe Dr. Berg is going to say that in there, but this also goes along with other videos about intermittent fasting, the idea that you want to only eat in a certain time of day. It's okay, generally speaking, if you're otherwise healthy, but if you're on medications, especially something like insulin, that can make the blood sugar go too low when you're not eating, you want to be monitored and be coached, have someone to talk to about how to reduce that insulin. I learned how to do this at the residential treatment program at Duke University called the Duke Diet and Fitness Center. I worked there where people came in every day and we got to look at their medications, we got to teach them what to do, how to reduce. In fact, I remember filling out, coming up with a flow sheet of the blood sugars, different time of day, and how to monitor and reduce the insulin as they were starting the program. So again, this is not intended for it's intended for a non-clinical situation, meaning it's not intended for those who are in medical care, who are on medications, someone who would come to see a physician for lifestyle change or medication change. The intermittent fasting, again, is a little complicated because I don't think intermittent fasting is fine as long as you're not eating carbs and you're not hungry. So in the context of the program that I teach, you're eating mainly meat, poultry, fish and shellfish and eggs, some leafy greens and some non-starchy vegetables, a limited amount of cheese, cream, mayonnaise, and oils. In this kind of context, your food that you're getting is mainly protein. It's high nutrition value when you do eat. And so if you're not hungry, you don't have to eat. If you want to call that intermittent fasting on my program, then great. But I don't think ignoring the hunger signals because, it's not time to eat yet is a good idea. My teaching is to, if you're hungry, you should eat, but if you're not hungry, you don't have to eat. The idea of intermittent fasting, to have a time period when you're not eating, is to get ketosis, is to get fat burning, is to get autophagy, the healing that the body has of itself. And that happens when you're not eating carbohydrates. When you don't eat carbohydrates, you're in ketosis, nutritional ketosis, you're getting those benefits. So here, let's get into the prolonged fasting and see what Dr. Berg has to say.
And then you eat this huge meal. Not a good idea, especially if you eat a carbohydrate meal and you have some type of pre-existing nutritional deficiency, because this could be dangerous and you can have a lot of problems. It's always good and safe when you come off a fast to just have a little bit of food, wait for a couple hours, eat a little bit more. And I wouldn't do carbohydrates. I would do a little protein, maybe an egg or a little bit of salad, wait a little bit, maybe have some nuts, an avocado, things like that. But don't do what I did. I mean, I was just like, because I didn't eat for a long period of time, I overcompensated. I just ate a ton of food and I felt really good for about a minute. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't feel too good. I feel really sick. My body from not eating just wasn't used to that much food. So break your fast with a smaller meal and gradually come out of it. I will put a link down below for more details on that thing. But this refeeding syndrome problem usually occurs if, maybe you have a problem with anorexia or you're a chronic alcoholic or you have some type of malabsorption issue where you don't get enough nutrition because you have inflammatory issues in your gut, or you're elderly, or you have advanced diabetes, or even you're on certain medications like antacids or diuretics that deplete you of certain nutrients, or you just basically have a low vitamin B1 deficiency. So that's when you start having problems with the refeeding syndrome. Because we have this shift.
I mean, how would you know if you had those? So I'm afraid we're getting into the type of video that gives you laundry lists of things that if you have medical issues, you're on medications, don't just follow a video, please. Go see a doctor who's trained in using these methods. And even then, I'm trying to think of a study that has more than 20 people doing prolonged fasting. I don't think that exists. I mean, in fact, you would want a study of prolonged fasting with thousands of people if you were going to assume there was the level of evidence similar to that's required of an FDA-approved drug. A drug requires thousands of people on protocol, on drug in clinical trials successfully and without harm, without too much harm, helping people before there's FDA approval. And I can't think of a study of that many, even if you combined all the studies. Now, you might argue, well, all of human history has had fasting and it's a natural thing to do. Well, the more, at least in my clinic, I see people who are taking medicines for years, and doctors don't seem to know how to stop the medicines, don't they? And that you may be already coming to me with some sort of nutritional deficiency, so that I don't want to do something so extreme. So please, what I start with is a real food-based low-carb keto diet that actually allows you to eat as often as you feel necessary throughout the day. And I don't want to endorse this kind of prolonged fasting because the studies aren't there. And you could give earnest advice like Dr. Berg is doing, but I want a little higher level of evidence before I'm going to make a policy saying you should do this.
because we have this shift of fluid and electrolytes from inside the cell to the blood. All right, so that's number one. Number two, dirty keto, which is basically you're doing low carb, but you're not looking at the quality of the food, you're not looking at nutrients. And like I said before, it's always this nutritional deficiency problem because when you eat junk food, even if it's low carb junk food, the quality's not there, the nutrition's not there. It can set you up for more problems because you're not eating and you're restricting these nutrients even more. Like, for example, zinc. Your body has enough stored zinc to last like 4 days. Well, let's say you don't get enough zinc from the diet, which a lot of people don't. And then here you are going into this fasted situation, and then you just magnified that deficiency. And a zinc deficiency can show up as a weakness within your immune system. It can affect your taste. It can affect your vision. It can affect your skin. It can affect your stomach, like gastritis, things like that. All right, number three, not taking nutrients while you're fasting. I always recommend taking at least, at a bare minimum, electrolytes, trace minerals, and B vitamins. But the point is, if you don't take these electrolytes, and I'm also talking about sea salt, and you're fasting, especially 2, 3, 4, 5 days, you might have issues like feeling faint, dizzy, heard about people just passed out. And also, when you're either on the ketogenic diet or you do intermittent fasting, you're running on ketones. Running on ketones increases the demand for certain nutrients like vitamin B1 and other B vitamins, and even potassium, which means you can also end up with something like keto fatigue or a keto rash or just weakness in general. All right, number four, kidney stones. Kidney stones can occur for several reasons. The most common one is uric acid stones. And let's say, for example, you're doing in the ketogenic diet, you're doing intermittent fasting. Typically, people eat a lot of almonds, right? And they might do some non sugar chocolate, or they also might do spinach. All three of those are very high in oxalates. And if you're predisposed to kidney stones, that can make it worse. I would definitely avoid those foods if you have a tendency to get kidney stones. And I would also take lemon juice in your water and drink enough water, like 2.5 liters of fluid a day. And that alone should prevent kidney stones.
That was going to be my first recommendation, is the copious amounts of water if you have a history of kidney stones. I'm getting a little nervous about all these things, aren't you? I'm thinking, I want to eat something every day so that I get these nutrients rather than have prolonged fasting. And, until there are studies published in peer-reviewed journals, I'm going to say, this is not worth looking into any further. And if you need something this strong, that you should see a physician who's trained in these methods and not just learn about it on your own. And I know that's a call that, again, I want to do more good than harm. And, we've talked before about the information in the comments on these videos. And let's say you had, 50 people say, I did prolonged fasting, I did great, and that's all well and good. But until you do trials, clinical trials, where you account for everybody, ideally you do randomized trials with a comparison of something similar, or let's say not the fasting, just a low-carb diet. You're not going to know if the prolonged fasting is any better than the low-carb keto diet. It might give you faster results, but it might also give you more side effects. So I'm hedging more on the side of, I want you to eat something every day, not to try to skirt the issue and get away with these deficiencies. And I don't know how to check for all of these. I don't think anyone does. The blood measurement of zinc is fraught with trouble. You have to look inside the cell, and a lot of times we measure the blood, but it doesn't tell us what's going on inside our cells. So I'm still going to say, don't do prolonged fasting. Intermittent fasting, if what you mean is you're doing a low-carb diet and you're only eating once or twice a day, that's fine, as long as you're getting great nutrition from a list like mine or some other teacher who's using a keto diet in their practice. But so I'm going to abort on this video and say, let's not go down this road as a learning on your own sort of thing. You want to do this with a physician that has measured your electrolytes at baseline before you do it and then follows you while you do it. And that would be consistent with the guidelines or the general practice pattern of the Obesity Medicine Association. Again, I'm past president of that organization, which would really want to make it as safe as possible for you. Hope that's helpful. If it is, press like. Be sure to subscribe to get further videos. And if you don't have my top 10 tips on how to start keto right, please look in the description below. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. And check out adaptyourlifeacademy.com.